All right, let's try to quickly work through the Mocha workflow for tracking a screen for a phone. For this demonstration, I've got a green solid screen on my phone with a couple of tracking markers on it, and I am purposefully holding the phone in a way that doesn't obstruct the screen with my fingers. Obviously, this is kind of an ideal scenario, but this is good for the basic tracking demonstration. I'll get into a more complex example in a future video. All right, Mocha, this is what we're here for. I'm going to draw with the X-spline tool right around the screen here. And again, ideal scenario, I don't have my hand crossing over the screen in any way. I'm going to enable perspective because there will be some motion. And just go ahead and track. This is just the default, almost ideal scenario. There are a few things with this footage that are not ideal. Great, that looks like it went well. I'm going to rename this just to be fastidious. You don't always have to do this, but I'll call this screen track just to cross the I's, dot the T's. The surface tool is very important. It's critical to this process. This is a case where I know the dimensions of the screen, I know the aspect ratio, and I'm going to create a comp in After Effects with content that will go on the screen. So I want to match the surface tool to the screen itself rather than expanding the corners to the frame using this button here, which I do in other contexts. I have another video that touches on that workflow. And I want to get really close here with these corners of this tool, but I don't quite want to touch. I want to give myself a few pixels of breathing room. I'd rather make the shape a little bit too big than too small, because I can always shrink things a little bit in After Effects to more closely match. So giving myself a couple pixels of a gap around the screen. I'm setting that border. Holding Z, clicking and dragging will help me zoom in and out, and then I can use my middle mouse button to click and drag, or hold X and then left click and drag. Hitting the spacebar, I'm able to preview how well the track is sticking, and that is good enough for demonstrations purposes. I'm sure that this track could be improved. It always can, but let's keep moving here. Now that we have done the tracking, we need something to apply that tracking data to. I've just created a comp in the dimensions of the phone. I just Googled the screen dimensions of my phone, and I created a comp to match that. And they're weird dimensions. This is like 2220 by 1080. 18 to 37 aspect ratio. Not something I would have guessed. I would have guessed 16 by 9, but they're not standard these days. Okay, so with that in mind, I've got my phone, and I should be able to just drag the phone in here, and in the Mocha dialog, create track data based on our screen track layer. Yep. Corner pin supporting motion blur. That's always nice. And then I will just select the phone screen demo and apply the export, and it is not working. Now, why on earth would that be? Well, the way that the corner pin data works in After Effects with Mocha, it works best if the layer that you are applying the corner pin data to matches the frame dimensions of your footage. And, I don't actually know why that is, but I know how to work around it. Okay, so I'm going to undo the applying of that data in order to match the dimensions of my frame. So I'm going to take the phone screen comp, pre-compose it, and I'm going to rename this one resize or something like that. And I will enter the dimensions of my footage. It's 1080 by 1920. I know you can't see my top menu, but I'm selecting layer, and in the layer menu, transform, fit to comp. And the keyboard shortcut here on a Mac is Option Command F, which I believe is Control Alt F on a Windows. And that will stretch your narrow comp to fit the dimensions of your 16 by 9 comp, which does look really strange, but you can apply the corner pin data from Mocha to that layer, and then it will line up nicely with the screen. Okay, one thing you will definitely notice is that we still have a lot of that nasty green spill on my hands, and that is a production problem. That's my fault. I shot this quickly in fairly low light in my office, but there are things that can be done about it. In the effects menu, I'm going to search for spill, advanced spill suppressor, drop that on the footage. I'm going to choose the ultra method, and that will take away most of that green saturation in that area. There can be unintended consequences with this effect if you have other green things in the scene, so you have to be careful. Sometimes you have to draw a mask around the areas where the green is spilling so that the effect only applies to those areas. But for our purposes, this is going to be good enough. We'll just call it good enough. And you see that we now have corner pin motion applied to our lovely layer here. And the corners are sticking nicely where we placed them before. Oh, one thing I forgot to do is actually enable the motion blur for this layer, which is an option that I deliberately selected when creating the Mocha corner pin data. And you can see that does make a difference. Okay, so we've got some nice blur. I'm going to play this back full screen. So there's a phone screen track under fairly ideal conditions. There are a few things that could be improved about the shot for sure, but the basic process is the same for all tracks. It just gets a little more complicated sometimes. My next video will explore a slightly more complicated and difficult track.